The modern era is full of every convenience one could think of. We have reliable heating, indoor plumbing, and even at the barest income levels, people could still afford soap and shampoo. These common necessities now were once considered as luxuries, but even further in the past, these products were even unheard of. The Victorian era, a 63-year period from 1837 to 1901 that was marked by the reign of Queen Victoria of the British Empire, was an iconic period of history shrouded in vast political reform and social change. The rapid growth of primarily agrarian nations turned into highly industrialized economies owing to the Industrial Revolution. Incredible progress in fields of literature, arts and sciences pioneered by Charles Darwin and Charles Dickens. A railway and shipping boom, as well as the first telephone and telegraph, considered as one of Britain's greatest eras, saw the country create the world's biggest empire, with 1/4 of the global population owing allegiance to the Queen. All these together portray an impressive image of the Victorian era. However, the Victorian era also saw the demise of a content rural life with rapidly expanding cities and slums, long and regimented working hour for labourers in the newly emerging factories, the horrifying case of Jack the Ripper, and the even more horrific Crimean War. Although the most horrific part about the Victorian era was the hygiene and sanitation in urban Britain. Victorian Britain is one of the most romanticised periods in history, with extended coverage in films and literature, depicting it as a time of great civility, manners, and grace. Contrarily, it was anything but a pleasant place to be in. During the Victorian era, health and sanitary conditions were not at all great. Viruses and bacteria were quickly spread throughout London, such as tuberculosis, smallpox, measles, scarlet fever, cholera, etc. Horse transportation and cesspools filled the streets with feces. Viruses were untreatable at the time, and sewage disposal was at its lowest peak. The Victorian era was a decidedly filthy period in Western history, when public sanitation had not caught up with the major mechanical advances brought on by the Industrial Revolution. There was no such thing as fresh air in the larger cities. Every home and business needed energy, so it was a requirement to burn something, like wood or coal. The result was the soot and smoke of hundreds of thousands of fires saturating the sky. The cities reeked of sulphur and carbon, and thank goodness for that, because it covered another malodorous problem. The streets and rivers all overflowed with a sloppy mix of rainwater, animal, and human waste. By 1860, the Thames, for instance, was visited by thousands of tons of fecal matter every day from all the pipes and runoffs that emptied into it. Imagine the smell on a hot day. Oh boy. In the 19th century, besides walking of course, horses were the only source of transportation. Horses were walking all day and constantly hungry and thirsty. There was nowhere to dispose of the animals' feces, so it was found all over the streets. The government was sick of complaints and decided to hire young boys to walk around with the horses and pick up its feces. Over time, the situation didn't work out as well as the government had hoped. As a result, the streets were found to be covered in feces again. In the Victorian era, toilets were not available, so every home had a cesspool. Cesspools were basically just deep holes that people would go to the bathroom in. Over time, the cesspools would fill up, and night workers would go around and empty them. It was illegal to empty cesspools in the daytime because of the foul stench. Some people who could not afford the fees of the workers would dump buckets of feces onto the sidewalk in the middle of the night, which was another huge sanitary issue. The main issue was the absence of a proper sewage system in place. The drains and the streets were overflowing with garbage and feces with no place to go. Joseph Bazalgette was a significant engineer who helped solve these sewage problems. He designed an efficient sewage system where he connected most of the sewage systems to the 82-mile-long sewage network supporting London. However, as most of the sewage was led into the Thames River, this did not solve the problem of the putrid smells coming from Thames that went all through town due to the hot weather. The smells came up from the ground through all the things connected to the pipes. The foul stench caused the issue of the Great Stench in 1858. The smell itself could even affect people. When the Thames flowed with undiluted sewage, the air was exceedingly foul and the death rate high. Even the Parliament was worried about the smell killing its members in their debating chamber overlooking the river. It was believed that bad smells caused disease. However, they were ignorant of the most important hidden problem. There was the smell, but then there was also the resulting contagion. This water harboured all manner of diseases, everything from typhoid to cholera. During this time period, many contagious diseases spread through London. Most common diseases of the time were cholera, smallpox, typhus, yellow fever, scurvy, scarlet fever, whooping cough, measles, tuberculosis, and rickets. The worst mistake of Victorian London is considering the disease were caused by the smell and despicable attempts to cure the smell. There were recurrent, terrible epidemics of cholera between 1832 and 1853. It took Dar John Snow a decade of deaths to persuade the establishment that cholera is a waterborne disease, nothing to do with bad smells. Even though it led to planning for the treatment of sewage and water, it took decades to transform London back to the way it was before. Living in such conditions, proper hygiene was essential. While some well-to-do families had indoor plumbing by the 1880s, many did not, which meant trips to the outhouse cesspool when nature called. Women of the era wore a lot of skirts and bustles or hoops which were exceedingly heavy and took a long time to dress and undress. It was a time when even the most elegant lady wore crotchless undergarments, so she could easily squat over a bedpan without having to lift up pounds upon pounds of clothing. To clean herself up, she used old newspapers, leaves, or even corn cobs. Showers were not yet a thing, and everyone bathed to keep clean. Poorer families would have boiled water on the stove, then added it along with cool water to a wooden or metal tub, usually in the kitchen area, when it was time for a deep scrub down. However, most people bathed in rather smaller quantities of water in their bedrooms with a basin, a pitcher of cool water and a cloth. Hands, face, armpits, and crotch were the essential regions, and it was not necessary to be submerged in water. As a result, people merely wiped their essential regions with a wet cloth as a means of maintaining cleanliness. Women hardly washed their hair as the process was quite long and not entirely pleasant. Women were advised to dilute pure ammonia in warm water and then massage it through the scalp and hair, like modern shampoo. However, working with ammonia was quite a bit more dangerous than getting a few drops of lather in the eyes. Ammonia becomes highly corrosive when reacting to water, which would probably be very effective at stripping hair of grime, while also stripping the skin of its superfluous top few layers. The alternative of ammonia for washing hair is just as unpopular: onion juice. It didn't necessarily work to cleanse the hair of grease, but it was believed, at least by some, to make tresses long and shiny. Of course, onion juice stinks, as did the clothes in the era. The elegant stiff gowns and dresses in Victorian England usually went unwashed because the fabrics and embellishments were just too fragile. It was also due to the fact that washing clothes in the late 1800s was a laborious process. Most household manuals recommended soaking the clothes overnight first. The next day, clothes would be soaked, boiled or scalded, rinsed, wrung out, mangled, dried, starched, and ironed, often with steps repeating throughout. Some manuals recommended scalding and rinsing up to 3 times. This long and arduous process involved a small group of washerwomen boiling water in huge tubs for almost every step throughout the process. As one can imagine, most people were unwilling to do such hard and time-consuming labor, and most people could not afford the fees it would take to hire anyone who was willing to go through the lengthy process. As a result, mostly clothes were left unwashed and simply treated with smelling powders and perfumes, contributing as another factor in the hygiene problem of Victorian England. The common man today has a life expectancy of 80 years. However, in Victorian England, due to the concurrent outbreak of disease and epidemics, the middle-class men might live, on average, to 45 years. The average lives of workmen and labourers, as well as women, spanned just half that time. Children were lucky to even survive their 5th birthdays. The horrendous situation of hygiene and sanitation in Victorian era is one of human civilization's greatest incompetency ever recorded. Stay tuned to find out more about the dark side of the Romantic periods in history. Lifting the veil, hiding the secrets of history. This is History in One. Please like, subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out. Thank you for watching. See you again next time on History in One.